welcome to Lawyer of the Week. Lawyer of the Week is creating a global community of lawyers, solicitors, and their support to inform and to encourage each other. My name is Pamela Deneuve, and please join us for our interview this week. Welcome to Lawyer of the Week. I'm so pleased to have you here this week, and our guest is Dr. Peter McMillan. He is a lawyer and a cognitive scientist. He is the founder and CEO of Meister Line and author of the book Unlocking the Secrets of Legal Genius, Measuring Specialists' Legal Expertise Through Think Aloud Verbal Protocol Analysis. He is one of the world's leading authorities on how expert lawyers think. Peter began his legal career as a competition law specialist in 1992 and went on to work for major corporate law firms and government authorities in both Australia and Hong Kong. In 2006, he resigned as the head of competition law at an international law firm, completed a PhD in law and cognitive science, and he established Meister Line Analytics Research Lab, and in 2016 launched the world's first cognition-based lawyer rating service, the Meister Line Index. You can find out more about Peter's work at meisterline.com, and I'll have all of his links beneath our post here. It's MEISTER line, LINE.com. Dr. Peter McMillan, so pleased to have you as our guest today.
Thanks, Pam. It's great to be here.
I'd like to ask you our Lawyer of the Week questions. And the first question is, when and what made you decide to become a lawyer?
Well, Pam, I grew up in Australia, actually in a small rural community in Tasmania, which is the island state. And I didn't have any contact with lawyers as I was growing up, and went to university to study economics. But after my first year, the university invited me to study law, so I could get a law degree and an economics degree just by doing a 5 years overall term of study. So in Australia, law is an undergraduate degree, unlike the US. So I just took up the opportunity. I had no idea what being a lawyer was all about. But so that's how I finished off at university. And then when I graduated, I went in work for the government as a competition law specialist. And from there, I went on to law firms. It just seemed to be that combining economics and law was great for competition law, because I think we've spoken before how as a competition lawyer, you have to apply economic principles. So it was perfect for me, but I had no idea and no plan that I would end up where I did.
That's very interesting. When you were like in high school or in grammar school, did you think about being a scientist or something like that? Or did you always like science?
Pam, actually, I wanted to be a drummer. I wanted, with all my heart, to be the world's greatest drummer.
Oh, really?
And in fact, before I studied economics, I was going to go and study music at university. But I decided in the end there was probably more of a career for me if I studied economics. So I didn't, I think actually it's interesting because now that I studied cognitive science later in life, I think it really is something that appeals to me and something that I'm good at. But it also has a lot of similarities with the law. You know, you have empirical evidence, you try to understand how things work. It's the same type of principle, so not unrelated. And I think if you, like a lot of people's careers, if you look at it as you're going through it, it doesn't seem like there's much of a pattern or much of a line. But when you look back, I think it all connects pretty well.
That is true. I have found that to be true. Well, let me ask you our next question then. Tell us what your life as a lawyer, tell us about your life as a lawyer, your biggest wins and your biggest challenges.
Okay. So I had a very specialized area of practice, competition law, antitrust in the US, which meant that I had to move to a big city. In Australia, that was Melbourne mainly. I also went to the equivalent of Washington in Australia, which is Canberra, because I had to go to those markets where my highly specialized skills were valued. And similarly, when I went to Hong Kong, I was able to work in the competition law area. And in Hong Kong at the time, there was very limited competition law. And only in the telecommunications sector, they just introduced a new merger and acquisition law. And that's where I wrote the first 3 merger decisions in Hong Kong for
Really?
in terms of competition analysis. So that was a great achievement, that's one of my successes. But also there was that challenge of maintaining that career. So when you look at expert lawyers, you know that they have to always be increasing the challenge of the work they do. And if you stay in a small town, it's very difficult to do that. So there's a very neat saying. It says some people have 20 years experience and
Yeah.
some people have 1 year of experience 20 times. So you have to be that person who is being challenged again and again and again so that you will grow as an expert. So that was a challenge for me, and I had to keep moving around. I suspect a lot of experts will do that unless, of course, you already start in London or New York, something like that.
So I'm just kind of curious, how did you end up in Hong Kong? Was it just to find the variety, or to be an expert, or a big city where you could be where you could learn and grow?
Well, in fact, Pam, when I was young, growing up in this rural community in Australia, my mother had National Geographic magazines, and I'd flick through them and I'd see the world, and Hong Kong was actually one place that really appealed to me. But in terms of competition law development, there wasn't much going on, only in the telecommunications sector. So again, I was very focused and targeted, and I want to get a particular job with the government where I'd be able to, for instance, write these merger and acquisitions decisions. So I really focused on that. I think in Asia, now competition law is becoming more established, but at the time it was a bit like a frontier area of law. So that really excited me. I think doing new things in Asia in competition law was what really motivated me. And again, you've got to be really interested in what you're doing, and maybe you look at things in different ways just to keep that motivation up, because it's hard work as well.
And you said that you were the one who wrote the first 3
Yep,
cases?
that's right. So the name was actually of the Telecommunications Authority, but when the cases first came in, and these were some really interesting cases with mainland China companies wanting to buy Hong Kong telecommunications companies. So establishing those precedents from the start was really good. And then, of course, you find people quoting your work. I felt a little bit like a judge, although I was just an official in the government department. So yeah, that was, I think, again, because it was new, it was a real challenge. So I really enjoyed that.
That's great. Now, who would you say is the perfect user of your lawyer expertise rating service?
When general counsel, in-house counsel, directors of legal operations, professional procurement officers within client organizations want to get lawyers, they have to do some due diligence and work out various things like, does the lawyer have a capability in a particular area, what level of expertise they are. And that's exactly what Meister Line ratings do. They are a quantification of the expertise of a lawyer in a specific area of law. So my ideal client is someone who will need to assess even a team of lawyers to see whether, for instance, you have a team, you're in-house counsel, and you're looking to have a team, a panel of law firms. And each of them will say have 10 people on their teams. So you'll look at one, and one will look a bit top heavy, because with the Meister Line ratings, you can see actually some of them are very highly rated experts and then very few low rated experts. But the next team would be one that has very few high rated experts, but a lot of the lower level experts. So that's probably the high leverage model. So with that type of analysis, you can then move on to return on expertise. You could say per unit of expertise that I'm buying, what am I getting? How much does it cost? So there's lots of interesting management metrics as well. So it really fits, I think, in the first instance, in the in-house legal team's department as being I think they're going to find most value of it. But lawyers themselves and law firms, they can look at the composition of their legal departments and to see, what levels of experts we have here, whether some of them might be on the cusp of partnership, and you can look at their development as specialists in a particular area of law. So we're not limiting what people can use it for, but I think in the first instance, it's going to be those in-house counsel. I think they'll find it really useful because they can put our ratings straight into a spreadsheet.
So Peter, how will the lawyers be rated? And will they take some sort of test or some sort of analytics that they go through in order to determine what their rating is?
Yeah, that's right, Pam. They'll go to the Meister Line website, which is an online rating platform. They will take about half an hour to fill out a form, and it'll ask lots of questions. And what we're trying to find out is their level of cognitive development, which is equivalent to their level of expertise in a specific area of law. Now, the various stages through which an expert develops their skills is something we've known about for a long time. If you go back to medieval Europe, you've got the novices and the journeymen and the apprentices and the masters. And so we know about how the development takes place. We also know in more recent years, cognitive scientists have given us an idea of the actual cognitive profiles of those lawyers in more technical terms. And what we've done at Meisterline is we've been able to put numbers down the bottom so that of this chart, so we can quantify and you can map those numbers onto cognitive development. So we get a very clear and precise measure of expertise of an individual lawyer. Now, the lawyers will have to take this test every year because over time, their expertise will hopefully increase. And we want to be able to capture that. So they keep it valid. Clients will simply ask lawyers for their rating, and the lawyers will then get tested. It takes them about half an hour, as I said. And then they'll also pay for it, so the client doesn't have to pay. Then they've got something that they can show, and it's quantifiable. So the clients can then put it into a spreadsheet and compare different lawyers in terms of their level of expertise. So I think that's the way it works, and it's something it shouldn't be too much of an inconvenience for the lawyers, but hugely powerful for the clients.
Yes, and it seems like the lawyers themselves would be able to measure their progress from year to year. Seems like that would be a valuable tool for them as well.
Well, exactly. And even more than that, probably in the next generation of our platform, we'll be able to calculate the trajectory. Using statistical models, we can find out whether a lawyer is on track to go to higher levels of expertise in their chosen areas of law. So, and certainly looking back, if a lawyer does it, say every 5 years, they'll be able to track on a chart their level of expertise development. So that's really interesting, not just for them, but also for their employers as well.
Excellent, excellent. That's very, very interesting. Now, we already talked about the perfect use would be the in-house counsel, but it also law firms too. They would use it as measuring as well.
Sure, and we've had a lot of interest from the people in the HR departments who would like to use it, and for obvious reasons. They can start to match up people for positions. They can find out whether someone maybe deserves a promotion or a pay rise.
Right.
Also, if they're going into partnership, just on the cusp of partnership, this will be one of the factors. I think something I need to emphasize is that the Meister Line rating is a very precise and powerful tool, but it will usually be used alongside as a complement to other things that people are looking at, like qualitative measures of how good is this lawyer at business development, how good are they at managing junior lawyers or working within teams. So they can look at that, but we look at that cognitive ability, those technical skills, which I think are core to what lawyers do, but it's not the whole game.
That's great. So really their expertise level will be truly defined.
Correct.
Excellent, excellent. So this is very fascinating that you've developed this. So what kind of legacy would you like to leave as a cognitive scientist who studies how legal experts think?
I think, Pam, that's exactly you've more or less described, because this is a new area of I suppose, scientific investigation. Being the first is, again, something that I really like to be able to do, a bit of a pioneer. But I think if it becomes a standard, if people see how useful and reliable it is to use, then that'll be very gratifying. I think it's a really powerful tool. So we're currently rolling it out in different jurisdictions around the world. And it's quite possible. Well, another thing that's going to happen is we can actually apply these models outside of the law. So although we're talking about law now, we can apply them to engineers, people in finance, and people are already contacting us because they want to understand how they can use our modeling in other areas. So I think if it becomes more broadly used within the professional communities, that would also be very gratifying.
Oh, that's very exciting. That's very exciting. Well, tell me, we're going to just kind of change it just a little bit. could you tell me one thing that you like to do to manage your stress levels?
Sure. And Pam, this is something that I did while I was practicing law, and something I still do even with Meister Line and my work as a scientist. And that is, I go and see a psychologist to just work through some of the issues that's happening at work and at home. I think as a lawyer, we like to think about our own thinking. It's
Yeah.
something that I've discovered as a scientist studying lawyers. But when you think about it, how lawyers think is our stock in trade. So if I have the ability to speak with a psychologist about how I'm thinking and the problems I'm having, and that psychologist can come back and help me put in context what's happening and help guide me through those things, that's hugely useful. And I think it's important to have someone who is obviously very capable as a psychologist, but someone who is not a family member or at
Yes.
work, because then you can just download all of the stuff you're talking, and you don't have to worry about the burden that you're placing on them. So it gives you a lot of freedom. But I think exploring your own thinking, working through issues with someone who is trained to do that is hugely important. And in terms of stress, sometimes, we get stressed about things for no good reason, so we can discover that. Other stresses are very real, and we have to get to the root of why that's happening, but we can work through them. So there's no stress that can't be managed in some way. And that's something that I learned by going to counselors and psychologists. So it's something that I recommend to a lot of people.
Oh, I think that that's so true. They, have rolled out the new lawyer Wellbeing, and
Yeah,
they're just asking lawyers to actually look and see if they need to go and get outside help.
yeah,
And, it's an important thing to do. And there's a saying that you can't get the whole picture yourself because you're inside the frame.
right. Yeah,
So,
that sounds right to me. Yeah,
so someone's outside the frame can kind of look at the picture and give us a better interpretation of what we might be experiencing.
yeah, exactly.
Well, Peter, I have to tell you, this is so exciting that this is rolling out, and it's going to be helpful in so many different ways. And for you to be the first to develop this, to see the need,
Yeah,
it's going to be, I think the need is going to increase as time goes on, because, the legal profession is getting more and more competitive. And, lawyers are going to want to take the Meister line so that they can show their level of expertise and become more desirable and sought after as lawyers.
yeah, I think that's right, Pam. It's a differentiator, and it's because it's quantifiable.
Mhm.
You can say, well, I'm worth the fees that you're paying because I'm this level of expert. So, and it's also that finding these hidden gems of people,
Mhm.
but also lawyers who claim to be very good, but when you look at it, are not as capable as they're looking to be. So, presenting themselves to be. So it really, when it comes down to it, Meister Line is about transparency, which also
Yes.
fits into the economics, because
Mhm.
we have a market of legal professionals, and it's very difficult to tell what you're buying. Even if you ask a lawyer on a rating of 1 to 10, how good are you?
Yeah.
And they will be scratching their heads, clients scratch their heads, because
Mhm.
it's a bit of an unknown quantity. So with Meister Line, we're coming in and we're opening up this area of expertise, adding that transparency. And once you have transparency, you can make better decisions on both sides.
Absolutely. Well, Peter, thank you so much for being our Lawyer of the Week. We really appreciate your sharing this information. I think it's going to be new for a lot of people,
Yeah.
especially in the U.S. And so this is great, and we appreciate your making the time to share your information with us today.
Thank you, Pam. Always a pleasure.
Thank you for joining Lawyer of the Week. We hope to see you again next week.